And welcome everybody to another Smart Money Circle show. I'm Adam Sarhan. With me today is a man who's doing very, very noble things. He's helping the world get rid of the flu and SARS and so many other viruses. His name is Jim Martin. He's the co-CEO and CFO of Cocrystal Pharma. Ticker symbol, is COCP. Jim, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you, Adam. Pleasure to be here, and thank you to the audience.
So, Jim, I'm very, very supportive of your cause. I love it. I think I'm very passionate about biotech companies in general, specifically ones that solve big problems like what you're doing here. So I'm really excited about today's show. But before we jump in, can you tell us how you got started and how you got to where you are today, please?
Okay, yeah. I mean, let me go way back. So my mother was a bookkeeper, so I had some background in accounting. And when I took accounting classes, I seemed to be able to handle them pretty easy compared to the other people. So I ended up getting into accounting, figuring everybody needs an accountant, so it's pretty stable. But then I went through a few industries like software development, worked with those guys, and that was really cool. And then I got into aviation. That was awesome. But then when I went into biotech, it just blew my mind. I mean, the science, and I really started getting into it like a hobby. And I really had accounting and stuff down pat. You can tell I'm not a young guy, so I've been through quite a bit. So there's really had all that under control, and so the science side really was so intriguing to me, and so I've just enjoyed that ever since. I really enjoy biotech and what we're doing. As you said, it's noble. Helping. We're helping investors, but we're also helping people. So
yeah,
I like it.
You started off as a CPA, and then you joined other companies, became all the way up to CFO, and then ultimately you switched over, and now you're the co-CEO and the CFO at Cocrystal Pharma. Is that correct?
Correct.
I love that. Okay, so now let's talk about the business. Please tell us about your business and some competitive advantages, what you guys do.
So the business was founded by some guys that were part of ICOS. They were working on a drug actually for hypertension. It failed in the trials, but it had an interesting side effect, and that became Cialis. That side effect was, pretty special, I guess. So they sold ICOS for, a lot of money, and then they had nothing to do. And one of their people in their group that was a good friend, Dr. Roger Kornberg, had recently got his Nobel Prize in the understanding RNA and the replication of some viruses and how that polymerase, the transcription works. And they decided to kind of work on that and see if they could, come up with antiviral drugs. And they reached out to a very rich guy because they were all very smart, but they didn't have the kind of money. And Dr. Philip Frost, he had that kind of money. He was a billionaire, still is, and he funded them privately. And eventually they started working on a drug discovery platform, is what we call it. This whole way to get from A to Z in developing antiviral drugs. And they really perfected that. And once they did, they decided to go public. And in doing so, there was an acquisition to help move things along. And since then, we've just been developing antiviral drugs. Had a pretty good deal with Merck that's ongoing, and raised some money, and right now we're well capitalized, and we have some very exciting programs that they're working on.
Love it. So for the audience that's not familiar specifically with what you're looking to target, is you're targeting antiviral kind of problems, and you're trying to solve that, like the flu, SARS, COVID, things of that nature. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. So sometimes I have to make sure the audience is clear. We're a therapeutic company, which distinguishes us from a vaccine company. So, we cure the disease when you get it. And right now, let's take, for instance, COVID-19. There was for a while no approved therapeutic, and then Paxlovid got approved. But you could do your own research. There's a lot of improvements that could be done on that compound. That's the only one that's out right now, and just ask around. It's not a secret there. And so, we're working on that next therapeutic for COVID-19, which is COVID-19 is going to stick around. It's just like influenza. It continues to mutate like influenza. and it will continue to be a problem. So thankfully, the way these viruses mutate is that, the ones that are the most deadliest tend to go away because you kill your host, you kill yourself. They don't stick around. So the ones that stick around are ones that just really get you good and sick, but don't quite kill you unless you're, in bad health, secondary causes there. But so it's really mutated in a way that it can stick around. It's not killing as many people, but it continues to be a really bad disease, just like influenza. Influenza has gone pandemic a few times in history, and eventually the pandemic version goes away because it learns to, don't kill them with a host, just keep going. And then we're also working on norovirus, which, believe it or not, there is no vaccine or no therapeutic for norovirus. And I think you mentioned you're down here in Florida now.
Yep.
And so it's called the cruise ship virus down here because, billions of dollars are lost every year on cruise ships having to be canceled. And the norovirus can hit anywhere where people are in close confinement, like the military, the Navy, retirement centers, hospitals. So, and to believe that, the unbelievable part about that is that there's no vaccine or no therapeutic for noro. So we have a couple of compounds that are really highlighted at the company. So one of them is CC42344. It's a compound that has already completed a phase 1 for influenza. We're getting ready to go into phase 2 here in the next couple months for influenza. And that same compound, and that's an oral, you take it orally. But we also have, we took that same compound and we have it where you can use it for inhalation, which also targets directly to the lungs and can act like a prophylactic where, if for instance, you got influenza, you could actually give 42344 to your family to prevent them from getting it. It'll cover them for a few days to make sure they don't get the virus. So, and then we also have CDI-988. That's our other compound, the two that I'll highlight here. That compound, we're preparing a phase 1, which has already begun over in Australia, and that one was for COVID-19. The polymerase at what we attach to, which stops the replication of these viruses, all of our compounds target the replication of these viruses, is the same for norovirus. And very similar. And we found that this same compound is a very strong antiviral for norovirus. So the phase 1 we're going into for COVID-19 in Australia is also going to be used for our norovirus program. So the CDI-988 is a lead for 2 of our programs now. And we're going to do a phase 1, which will cover both. So we don't have to spend money on 2 phase 1s. And that's, I didn't go into how we develop drugs, but we specifically develop broad spectrum antivirals just for things like this. We wanted to be able to go after a few different viruses. So we really target areas that are common in viruses.
Wow, I love that. So let's talk about the TAM, or the total addressable market, for a second, please, Jim. Talk to us about that and what the potential is going forward.
I'm sorry, Adam. What was the
TAM.
question? What?
The total addressable market, the TAM for you.
These are multi-billion-dollar markets in both influenza. Right now, the leading compounds that are out there, the leading drugs, have a lot of have already not shown to be 100% efficacy on them. There's a lot of mutation in these viruses, so there's a very large market. Tamiflu itself, which is one of the lead ones, has a very low success rate and is actually out of patent, so it's generic at this point. And there is a strong need for a strong influenza. Obviously, we still have influenza every year. People still get sick even though they're vaccinated, and some, a lot end up in the hospital, and unfortunately some pass away. So between this specific compound, we're going through a phase 2 for an oral, but this also can be used intravenously, the same compound. We've been able to test that, and it's also can be used for in an IV. So there's different markets, either in the hospital or outpatient for that compound. Again, multi-billion. And then the same with COVID-19 and norovirus. These are very, we have other viruses that we're looking at, but we've, as a starting off, we went out for the big ones, the larger market, the multi-billion-dollar global markets, and a huge market just in the US alone, to make sure that we cover take care of ourselves here. And so
I love that.
Potential.
So Jim, let's talk about your relationship or collaboration with Mark, if you will, please.
Yeah, so the drug discovery platform that I said was the foundation of the company that we spent the first few years really quiet as a private company developing, working with Dr. Roger Kornberg on what he had discovered and won his Nobel Prize in. That platform is very powerful, and it creates, a large number of antivirals, compounds and crystals for testing. And Marca tried to do something similar from what we understand, and they did not have as much success. So they came and partnered with us to use our platform. And the target was they wanted to go after influenza A and B, and they had specific requirements. It was a little bit unsimilar, not like our influenza target. Theirs was a little bit different. So there was no conflict there. And they asked us to develop potential lead compounds. And so for 2 years, we worked hand in hand with them very, daily. For the first 2 years, it was really all our side. We did all the work. They paid for it. They paid for our scientists and everything. We had already done a little bit of work on this type of target, so they paid us some money for the work we did. And at the end of the 2 years, we had a number of compounds that had a high potential, and we basically handed over to them. And that's how the partnership works. Is now they have their strength, and what they're doing is they're going through all these compounds, doing really a lot of testing, and a lot of just basically knocking them all out to find the best one, which then they will take into clinical trials, and commercialization is the plan. And along the way, there are milestone payments and royalties that will come back to us. So they're very meticulous and very they move at their pace. They're a big company. Big companies don't move as fast as small companies, but they are definitely a very great organization in the way they meticulously go through the process, and they are still working on it. We communicate with them. It's an ongoing program, but at this point, it's mostly in their hands as they select a lead and use their large capital and their clinical resources to test the drug that they'll select.
Wow, I love that. Well, thank you very much for the overview and some great competitive advantages and a massive TAM. So you have a huge addressable market in front of you. Let's shift the conversation a little bit, Jim, and talk about risk. How do you handle risk, and what are some mistakes you see people make with respect to risk management? So
the way we handle risk is by having a decent bench of compounds. And, we're not just a one-trick pony going after X. The failure rate in this industry, I don't care how good you are or what company, how good you feel about your company, how much you believe in it. It's just a fact of the industry, So you have to have a bench to be ready to have something in case something fails. So far, knock on wood, we haven't had any failures, but I'm not, it is statistically possible. So that's one. Second, either we're smart or got lucky, but we made sure we raised enough capital going into COVID, because we knew that COVID was really going to slow down the economy. And when the economy slows down, companies slow down, everything slows down, capital gets very expensive like it is right now. And we were able to raise a good amount of money to weather the storm without any warrants tied to it. Our capital structure right now is just 10 million in common stock, no preferred, no material warrants out there. We have reported over 32 million in the bank. We spend about roughly $1 million a month because we run very lean operations. And another way we de-risk is by making sure that we run a very lean company. Right. Expenses can easily get carried away. Right. We contract out a lot of our work so that we only get done what we need and then cut those expenses off. The reason we went over to Australia is because they give you back 42%, over 40-something% of what you spend over there.
Oh, wow.
And they give you that. If you spend $1 million, you get over 400,000 back in cash. They wire you the money.
Wow.
It's not some tax rebate or some future
right.
thing. So that's another way we de-risk. Just being very close to the money, making sure we have a good broad bench, making sure we have great experience, in management. We have a very, a solid board of directors. We have a very good scientific advisory board, and we only spend money where we need to, contracting out, anything that we don't need to have in-house. Our core intelligence, I would say, is in our labs, and that's our core intelligence. And everything else, the grunt work, the lab work, we can contract out. We just piecemeal that out, and that really keeps the costs, under control.
I love it. And that actually links back to your childhood with your initial upbringing as a bookkeeper and looking at the numbers first and making sure you understand that there's cash flow out and there's cash flow in. So making sure that's all balanced, and your expertise as being the numbers guy and also the CEO now. So that speaks to your expertise. I love that. Okay. Timeless lessons. Jim, what are some timeless lessons you've learned along the way that you'd like to share with the audience, please?
Oh boy, timeless lessons. Well, don't tug on Superman's cape. No, some timeless lessons. So in biotech, I think that you have to understand that there's always a risk for failure in anything you're developing, and the way you can mitigate that risk as much as possible before you go into a clinical trial is huge. Because some companies, you get a little boost out of going into clinical trials from the markets. They love to see you're progressing, or you're in a clinical trial in 6 months. It's a fantastic company. And then, it fails in clinical trials and a bunch of money is spent and all that gains that were done, there's losers and winners. So we, one of the things that from our board of directors, they're very experienced. If you look at them, Dr. Philip Frost is done a lot of work, and Richard Finnegar, Fred Hassan, focus on the company, developing the company. I don't want to say it like this, but don't worry so much about that, the stock market and investment. That will, you have your PR, communicate, but that will work itself out. If you build a good company and build a strong company and keep a steady course and just get good compounds to market, everything else will take care of itself. I think that's the best advice. Just focus on your company and don't get worried and tied up with being public and all the stuff, and then all the talk and a stock going up today, down tomorrow, trying to figure out why it did it. I mean, if someone knew how to control that, they'd be a super billionaire. So it is what it is, the market. So focus on your company.
I love that. Now, what about some timeless mistakes that you'd like to share with the audience, please?
Well, where do we begin? I mean, you learn more from your mistakes, right?
Yeah.
So not with this company, but with some of the other biotechs, I think that one of the things I'll never forget is that, we had a flagship product we were working on that was really why the company was developed. And what happened is we had there's always a strong scientist behind the company, and that's a part of it in biotech usually. And so, there was a low-hanging fruit that we thought of, a hernia stapler, we'll call it. And most hernias are done by stitches. And we thought, well, let's get this going. It's not going to be expensive. It's an easy product to get to market. And, so we end up putting a lot of resources into that, into low-hanging fruit and stuff. and not enough into the flagship product. And by the end of the day, the markets change, money changes, things change over a year or two, and we end up, not doing what we should have done with that company, even though we did get the stapler approved. And at the end of the day, I would see that as a problem. Don't lose focus on what you're trying to do. I would say is a huge one. Know the market. That was another problem. At the end of the day, part of the problem was, it's a lot cheaper just to stitch someone who needs to buy a stapler.
Right.
And I think the last thing I would say that people should know is that just because you can develop drugs or a medical device, and you think, okay, we're going to get this approved, then we're going to start selling it. Understand that selling, that's a whole new beast, a whole new kind of company.
Right.
You can have your R&D company, you can be the best R&D company and develop some stuff, and then you think you're going to go out there and use that success to start selling. Selling's like a whole different division. So you gotta, it's a whole different ball game with selling, and you gotta have the right people brought in. Don't try to do it yourself. Bring in the right people, because dealing with the sales people and the government and all that, you really need to bring in that expertise.
That's
quite a bit I've learned.
No, I'll tell you, Jim, one of the comments, I look for patterns and commonalities here when I interview everybody that's been on the show so far. And over 11 seasons now, over 100 episodes with some of the smartest folks I could find. And one of the things that jumps out at me is that know your, Warren Buffett calls it the circle of competence, like know your lane, right? Know your area of expertise and stay focused on what you're good at. And then what you're not good at, find the expert or find those people that are really, really experts or really great at that one task or that two task, whatever that is, and then hire them, because the ROI there, even though you're paying $1 for whatever that expertise is, it's infinitely more than you trying to quote unquote figure it out yourself and stumbling, and then the learning curve and yada, yada, yada. So that's a really, really powerful thing you just said.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. I'm glad that someone else had brought that up, because you tend to, when you have success and you have people around you, patting you on the back about the success, it can tend to go to your head, and you just think, wow, I'm a really smart person. I could do other things. So, but you better know your lane, because it's a whole nother ball game. The sales side of a company is not the same as the science side of a company.
Question. I love that. And yeah, multiple people have said it. So it's definitely a common trait there. Okay, let's talk about leadership. Jim, in your opinion, what makes a great leader?
I think a good leader has to listen. I think sometimes you can get, and then on another thing, I think sometimes you can get lucky and just like a pinball hit all the right spots. But most of the times you're going to have failures, and you have to learn from those failures. Don't dismiss them. Don't blame something. Even though there's other factors, external factors, really look at yourself. Yeah, it could be he did something, but you're still a part of that, and that you're still a part of that failure. So take failures very hard and learn from them as much as possible to not repeat them. And I think, and also a leader has to inspire people in the company, really has to support them and pick the right people too. You got to have good people and then support them. If they're the wrong people, then you have to get the right people. But right, exactly. You have to support the people that are there, and you have to listen to them. Make sure you understand why they're doing what they're doing, and believe in them. And if you don't know what they're doing, don't, just because you may not know, learn what they're doing. Right. To be a good leader, you just can't, you got to kind of understand, even if it's a high level, even if you can't do it yourself, you got to get in there, roll up your sleeves and understand every part of the company. And when I was I did 5 years in the Navy, and there's this medal you get called ESWAS. I really wanted it. And to get it, you have to actually go through the whole ship and understand what everybody does. And you have to get signed off. There's a little book. And then at the end, you get this shiny little medal that makes you, look cool. When you're 21 years old, it's like awesome. So, and I always thought of that as being good leadership, just to go through the whole ship, understand everything. You don't have to do it. Don't try to be an expert, but at least know what everyone's doing and respect what they're doing.
Wow. Well, thank you very much for your service. That I like even more now. I did not.
Thanks.
Okay, beautiful. You mentioned part of leadership is learning from your failures. Let's talk about obstacles and adversity. How do you handle adversity, and what are some obstacles you've had to overcome?
So I think there's always going to be adversity. So it's part of life. So just get that in your head. Don't get too upset about it. It's a mental state. It just is what it is. Just have the right attitude,
Yeah.
Um, and I always think of, going back to the military, that movie with Clint Eastwood, go over it, under it, adapt, figure out a way, no matter what you have to do to get around any of these obstacles, think outside the box. But there's always going to be challenges. Some of them are very unique. I think it's also important to be able to have good vision, to look ahead, just like driving a car. You don't want to see the deer right when it's in front of you. It's farther you can look out and just be, you can't spend every night thinking about every problem way out ahead of you. I mean, that'll drive you crazy. And part of the experience will tell you, make sure you get a good night's sleep. That's important. So don't overthink them, but look far ahead, be aware of what's out there. As it gets closer and these problems look like, any obstacle that gets in your way, just find a way to adapt and get around it. And keep a very open mind on how you solve the problem. Do not get into that tunnel vision. Even though sometimes you do have to do that, you have to actually put on tunnel vision, just push your way through an obstacle, which is another way. You can't go over under, just knock it out of the way sometimes.
Yeah.
Just pound it. But
Yeah.
just keep a good attitude about it. Just don't get upset. Don't let it, affect your emotionally and your, and then affect your, the way you think, and losing sleep. And then you make bad decisions. You always got to keep a clear head, push forward, and always remember what the goal is. In our case, we want to get, drugs developed and commercialized. So that's the goal. So, how we get there, is going to be full of obstacles. We already know that. There will probably be a failure. I hate to say that, knock on wood, but we haven't, you just kind of know these are possibilities.
Yeah.
And you have to be ready. Now, that's why I said we have a nice bench. We don't anticipate any problems. I'm not saying that at all. I mean, it's just a reality of life that you have to be ready for them,
Yeah, it's a sign of maturity and expertise too, where it's like, okay, we're not expecting it to happen, but if it happens, we're going to be okay. Almost like if a hurricane hits Florida, you don't want it to, but if it does, it's okay. I'm still standing. I'll take my precautions and move on. It's fine. We can move forward.
I got impact windows. I got insurance. I'm ready. I don't want it to hit, but I'm ready.
Yep. Okay, I love it. And then finally, in closing, Jim, what's the best piece of advice you'd like to give to the audience or give to your 30-year-old self?
Invest in Cocrystal. Smartest choice you could. No, I'm just joking there. No, I'm not joking. But some good advice is to I think the way I said, I have to get to know the company as an investor. I think you should get to know the company. I think that investors, when they tend to get together in some of their groups, they really feed off of each other and never really dig in and understand the company, understand the management. If you set up a call, you can actually talk to management. You could really get a feel for the company, listen to their their presentations, just follow them, pick some company. That's the way Warren Buffett would do. He really gets to know his companies. He doesn't look, follow which way the herd's going. I think that's important for investors, is to really know the companies. And of course, no matter what, companies are going to go up and down. It's just, there's no, you don't see the straight line. It's always like this, it's always like that. So, and then I'm sure you know this, but I've heard this, and I always stuck in my head. You only make or lose money when you sell the stock. So what happens in between the time you buy it and sell it, that is what it is. But you only make or lose. And then sometimes you just, sometimes there's just winners and losers, and everything. So I think everyone knows this advice. So I don't think I'm telling anybody anything new, but
No, with the simplicity though of being able to repeat it and then quantify it that I find so valuable, because people know that they quote unquote should be doing sit-ups or whatever, but they're not actually doing them. So to hear it again and again and again, it's so incredibly powerful, because most people just get distracted. Or my friend Andy, he says they get lost in the sauce. They just get lost, and then when they hear it from you and then they hear it again and again, it's the repetition factor, and that's really, really powerful. Well, beautiful, Jim. Thank you so much for coming on the show. The ticker symbol is COCP, everybody. The website is cocrystalpharma.com. Jim, what's the best way for people to get in touch? They go to the website and reach out there with the IR page, or how would you like people to reach out to you?
Yeah, so the IR page, if you fill out the contact us, it gets an email that we review every week, emails that come to us. So just
Beautiful.
go to our website, cocrystalpharma.com, fill out contact us. If you're an investor and have questions, we get back to you. I mean, and if we need to, we'll set up a phone call, set up a Zoom.
Beautiful.
If you're a scientist watching the show and want to meet with Sam and really dig into the molecular level of the polymerase or whatever, we can set that up too.
Very kind of you. Well, Jim, thank you so much for coming on the show, and hopefully we'll have you.
Adam.
Thank you.